we'll be given a talk. Somebody will give us a talk. It doesn't have to be, we don't have pastors or priests or bishops or deacons. Anyone in the community can be asked to lead the Friday Juma prayer or do the talk. So anyone from the community can be invited to come and talk. Any questions on the times?
What would it do different times?
Okay, the one is when you advance the door, the call to prayer. So someone would stand on the top of the tower and they would call to the community, wake up, it's time to pray, and people would come to pray. But that will also be explained more in detail by this.
When you talk about faith and you talk about the relevancy of faith and the relevancy of religion, people don't care about what religion people belong to, what faith they belong to, because society is geared into such a particular format that secularism dictates how we run our lives. So when I explain the kind of significance behind what Reeve explained in terms of the young activists coming inside the mosque, the issue of the wudu and all the rest, I believe that there must be a cross-pollination between all of us. I mean, many of you sitting here have taken up Christians. You come from a Christian university. Are there any atheists here? Buddhists? Hindus? The majority of you are Christians. And so, based on that, I believe that there has to be a cross-pollination or a kind of a link in terms of our relationship as human beings. You see, when you look at the Shema, which is the creed, in Hebrew it sounds something like this. Shema Israel Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, which means, hear Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Now, 1,000 years later, you find someone called the scribe comes up to Jesus and questions him, Jesus, what is the first of all commandments? And Jesus repeats word for word what Moses said 1,000 years before, which was, Shema Israel Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, hear Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Some 600 years later, you have a Christian deputation, just like yourselves, from a part called Southern Arabia in Medran. They come to the mosque in Medina and they spend 3 days in the mosque. They stay in the mosque, they sleep in the mosque, they eat in the mosque, and on the Sunday, the Prophet, of course, even allows them the usage of the mosque to basically give their particular service. That's the open tolerance that we have in Islam towards people of different faiths. And there comes a time where, in the course of the discussion, this deputation brought to Muhammad and they tell him, now Muhammad, tell us what is your concept of God? Now, if it was any of us, we would basically prevaricate. We would say, well, look, he's just, he's holy, he's supreme, he's almighty, he's all-knowing, and so on. But here the answer comes as if someone is prodding him, or as if someone basically is telling him. And in Arabic, in the 112th chapter, you find the answer where the response given by Muhammad is, Qul Wallahu Ahad. Say, O Muhammad, he is God, the one and only. Now, interestingly, what I want to point out to this is that if you look at Hebrew and Arabic, both are sister languages. Linguistically, they're basically identical. And if you look at the word that Moses, when he used the word referring to God being one and only or absolutely unique, he used the word Echad. Jesus in Hebrew uses the word Echad. In Arabic, the word is Ahad. Someone would ask you, what's the difference? What's the difference between Echad and Ahad? And if I were to transliterate the Arabic into English, it would just simply be the question of putting a dot on the Ha, the Arabic alphabet, Ha, making it Fa, Echad. So essentially what I'm basically saying is that these faiths that these prophets preached were at a prime level the same. At a fundamental level they were the same. And so if you look at the evolutions of in the evolution of faith, or in the evolution of religion, in the fundamentals of the teachings of Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, and all the other prophets, there is not an iota of difference. Now if we acknowledge that fact, then you basically come and look at, for example, some of the things that Ariba explained to us when we enter the mosque. You pop your shoes when you enter the mosque. It's a simple action, which he explained. Basically as a mark of respect, but more than that, since we engage in congregational prayer, and since our form of worship involves bowing down, it's unhygienic to wear the shoes. But more importantly and significantly, that you find that this practice is not something which is unique to the Islamic worldview. If you look in the Old Testament, and particularly in the book of Deuteronomy, where God tells Moses, when Moses goes to the mountain, he tells him, "Go not nigh hither, put off your shoes from off your feet, because the place whereon you are standing is holy ground." So imbibing that principle, we as Muslims basically follow the same kind of precept, internalize the same message. The Arabian way we can explain to you the issue of the wudu, the washing, the actual ablution, washing yourself, and he gave the kind of symbolic significance behind washing your face, wiping your head, washing your feet, and all the rest. But at a primary level, there are three main reasons for that. The first being, no one can find any kind of fault for a person who takes himself seriously in terms of personal hygiene, washing yourself. Secondly, you are basically washing yourself because symbolically, as he explained, you are in a sense trying to remove all the negativity that you might find in your day-to-day life and your day-to-day affairs. And thirdly, more importantly, that there is a psychological factor that you're basically getting yourself ready to mentally prepare yourself to appear before God. And why I say symbolically, because in times of drought there might not even be water. What do you do then? Symbolically, you take either sand or dust and you basically wipe yourselves. So the symbolic significance is far more important in the longer term as opposed to just simply the physical washing. And over and above that, the fourth reason I want to point out is that, again, this practice is not unique to Islam. It's not institutionalized by Islam. It's something which was practiced and performed by all the past prophets of God. If you look at, again, the Old Testament in the book of Numbers, if I'm not mistaken, it says Moses and Aaron and their sons washed their hands and their feet thereat before they entered into the tent of the congregation. They washed as the Lord commanded Moses. You find the similar kind of commandment or practice in the book of Acts, in the 21st chapter, where Paul, the Apostle Paul, taking the men, purifying themselves, washing themselves, in the 21st chapter, I believe it's verse 26, wash themselves, purifying themselves, and then of course, then they worship. So, you see that at that particular level, you have this internalization. We can basically say in a broader sense that look, we are more Jewish than Jews and more Christian than Christians in the sense of the actual practices that we basically engage in. When you look at the particular hall, that's the first particular point that we need to understand. Now you walk inside and you sit in the hall, and the first point we basically come to mind is that, unlike, for example, a Roman Catholic people where it's just next door, unlike Buddhist temple, unlike a Hindu temple, we don't have pictures or portraits. All that you see here is architecture. And he explained in the ablution facilities, the design was architectural. There's no need for necessarily architectural design. Some people, of course, some mosques, some trust boards want to engage in architectural design, that's their particular privilege. But in a broad sense, there's no need for architectural design. Just a prayer mat, no pictures, and you have the direct communication with God. Most of the mosques that you see throughout the world are aligned in one particular direction. South Africa would be northeast. That faces towards Mecca. If you're in Europe, it will be southeast. If you're in the east, it will be west. If you're in the west, it will be east. Now, the reason for facing Mecca is not because God says he doesn't have a house or he doesn't basically reside in Mecca. The Quran, in fact, tells us, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَشْرِقُ وَالْمَغْرِبُ فَأَيْنَمَا تُوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. It does not matter whether you turn your faces towards the east or towards the west. For wherever you turn, the presence of God is there. So simply out of creating this idea of universality in brotherhood and universality in sisterhood, creating this universality, therefore you have a uniform direction. But it doesn't mean now that God resides in it. It doesn't mean that it's basic. And so basically that's essentially to create this whole concept of universality. I might also add that when he explained briefing the call to prayer, the azan, prior to coming to the mosque. Now, many of you have probably heard of if you are familiar with popular culture, you're familiar with movies, and sometimes you're familiar with what they have this basically playing out. And often it's a accompanied by either, if you're familiar with Steven Seagal movies or The Siege or Executive Decision and so on, it has a kind of a very sinister undertone that is replaced with. But in actual fact, it's very simple. The Muslim, which means the caller, the person who calls people to prayer, to worship, simply says, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, you said twice. It simply means God is the greatest, God is the greatest. He then says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, I bear witness that there is none worthy of worship except one God. If you accept that principle, he then goes on to say, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God. If you further accept these two principles, that there's none worthy of worship except one God, and that Muhammad is the messenger of God, and the next step is Hayya ala salah, meaning come to prayer, or come to worship. And in prayer lies your success, because the very next stanza is Hayya ala salah, come to success. And he winds it up by saying, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, God is the greatest, God is the greatest. La ilaha illallah, there's none worthy of worship except one God. Now, important to note that this is simply calling people to prayer, calling people to worship. Because prayer, again, I'm saying eventually it's incorrect to call it prayer. Is this unique? Is it something which is